X1. Fair Crypto Foundation is designing X1 as an open source L1 to achieve the original mission of blockchain, following the blockchain tenets of decentralization, transparency, counterparty risk resistance, peer-to-peer value exchange, and self-custody. This is Litepaper version 1.2 overall and in review. I want to thank you all Senians for the very valuable feedback we have gotten from you. Senians are strong, not afraid to make their voice heard, and it makes me really happy. The worst thing that could happen is apathy. A lot of people do care, and not only because they invested time and money in this, but because they want to see a change in the world. We listened to all the feedback extensively. I will now present the Litepaper version 1.2 in full and how it all fits together, and give more clarification as to what we are doing, why we are doing it, and how it all fits together. There will be a few minor updates, of which we already have announced. So let's rock and let's roll. First, a disclaimer: nothing of what I will present in this video is financial advice of any kind. If you do decide to speculate, you will do so at your own risk. Things can and they will change. This is purely educational content intended to inform and to spark a conversation. So here's the agenda. Zenzu delivers this menu. We will start by talking about the ideology behind X1, and then move on to the objectives with X1, what we are working towards and what we want to achieve with the chain. What is X1? And we want to comment on it in terms of performance as well. What makes X1 unique? There's many things that separates X1 from other L1s, so we will talk about that. The XN coin, the native gas coin, and its base utility. XN tokenomics, supply and the base parameters influencing inflation and deflation. XN token distribution, what are the core components for the machine that will get us to adoption. And then we will dive into the various distribution methods, how they will be done in relation to difficulty and time. So we have the Zen burn records, the Zen burn auction, and also the VMPX bridge conversion, which needs to be properly presented in order to be fully understood. Then we will talk about something very interesting, which is the synergetic economic forces, how we aim to create a powerful synergy and fee generation built into the core of the machine. And lastly, I want to talk about something that is not directly related to X1 specifically, but participating in the ecosystem in general. We are building value systems very closely related to money and investing, and speculation is a big part of it. So let's address it. Okay. Let's do it. Let's go. The ideology behind X1. Zen was created for a reason, and the reason was that it was apparent that there's a need for it. A peer-to-peer cash based on first principles that could scale. X1 will now be created for the exact same reason. There's a need for it. In the Zen Litepaper, we talked about the cause of it all, the why, and our ideas are actually nothing new. They originate back to 1988 with Timothy May, who wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto, introducing the basic principles of crypto anarchism, where he envisioned encrypted exchanges ensuring total anonymity, total freedom of speech, and total freedom to trade. Anarchy really refers to the absence of authority or other controlling systems, the organization of society on the basis of voluntary cooperation without political institutions or hierarchical government, the absence of government. And of course, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the Bitcoin white paper, where for the first time he introduced a system with a solution to the double spend problem. Electronic cash could now be sent from one party to another without a central authority in between. So now you could have property rights based on mathematics with self-custody. But the adoption of Bitcoin is way too slow. We are at 4 to 5% crypto adoption, and most of it is custodial. And we do have to question if change will come from outside or inside. As you know, Zen has taken a fundamentally different approach than Bitcoin, with vampire technology, interoperable approach forcing existing systems to interact with first principles. Added to that, the powers that be are in the workings of far worse systems than we already have today, where CBDCs are one of the horrible implementation they are in full swing of creation, which basically are systems with full transparency for them but not for you. And not only that, these systems will yield them the power to reach into your bank account should you not follow the party line for the greater good. And what they offer in return is convenience. It's for your safety and your convenience. That's what they say, and the population will fall for it, as they always have, unless there are alternatives. The trend we have experienced in crypto since Bitcoin has been very worrying, where a multitude of organizations have convinced users to give up their self-custody, been highly centralized and not transparent. Many times in the name of adoption. Many influencers in our industry have and continue to push for these solutions, even though in reality it's halting adoption to a great extent. One by one, these organizations have failed and will continue to fail as long as the systems are built with trust and not truth. What we need are systems you don't have to trust because you can verify. And although technological advancements can be entertaining and stimulate the nerdy minds, the design choices of the infrastructure that was supposed to provide more freedom where Bitcoin lacked those possibilities has not been an impressive view from the crypto anarchist point of view, which is the view we need to have because it's why we're here in the first place. And this is why I take you back to the roots of crypto yet again, and I will never stop doing it. And as I've said in the beginning, as long as this is the case, we always need to go back to the roots of first principles. Otherwise, what's the point? We will just recreate the very same systems we tried to get away from in the first place. You're just going to create something that looks and feels free, but then eventually hijacks your freedom and makes unnecessary trade-offs out of your control to the nature of misaligned incentives. These guys aren't going to change now. They made their design choices. And these guys aren't going to change because they don't want to. So it's up to us to build something that takes us back and leapfrogs forward. With Zen, we proved and we have learned that, and we can back up these statements with over 1 billion data points, that the model of having users fully trustless create value straight from the protocol with self-custody through minting works. And this is proven by the fact that minters today are getting a premium on their mints, and this has been shown throughout the Zen ecosystem on 11 battle-tested EVM chains. We can have a financial ecosystem with fully transparent, decentralized monetary policy, where QE and QT is totally dictated by self-sovereign participants who have the power to convert their economic energy into something with a different token and inflation structure and utility through burning. All this without central authorities governing or dictating the decisions. We proved that the model is scalable based on the immutable nature of the code, the rapid growth of the network, and the aligned incentives for continuous growth. First principles is a competitive advantage, not only due to the financial surpluses made, but also due to the fact that the Zen ecosystem lacks many of the vulnerabilities, the unnecessary uncertainties that have made systems fail or become corrupt in the past. We also learned something about human behavior. As long as a user comes to the conclusion that the value he will get in the future is more than he has to pay in gas now, he will execute that transaction, which is not only true for EVM, but also for Bitcoin, as we have shown and proved. So Zen is first principles peer-to-peer cash. We have this fantastic cash money that we can use however we want. That's impossible to shut down, being censorship resistant through adoption on 11 chains and counting, and that lives up to the first principles better than anything anyone has ever seen, period. We have Bitcoin and it's great, but we want the creation process to come from the individual being able to create value straight from the protocol with no intermediaries. And we have an ability and potential to scale faster, which is what we need. So Zen is not really competing with Bitcoin more than it's complementing it with 1,000 touch points and aligned incentives. So where Zen is peer-to-peer cash, X1 is peer-to-peer infrastructure. X1 is peer-to-peer trustless infrastructure designed to accelerate adoption of Zen and first principles of crypto. Decentralization, transparency, peer-to-peer value exchange, counterparty risk resistance, and self-custody. Cash alone is not going to make a change in society. Systems in all forms will. So the challenge we have fallen in love with is, how do you now convert the principles that has worked so well for cash into infrastructure, which is completely different kind of a value system? It's deeper than a protocol. X1 is amplifying Zen and creates roads for Zen to travel with bridges, cross-chain interoperability, wallets, dexes, marketplaces, and having value creation, distribution, and trading in an environment which is trustless at its core. Infrastructure is very different from currency, which in relation takes very little effort to get done. It's by magnitude way more complex to produce. Infrastructure have to be secure, stable, has high performance, and do all of the things it describes to do. Not the same thing as making ERC20 or BRC20 tokens. We take this with uttermost seriousness. It's about making a trustless open source system for longevity. So the question we have to answer is, how do we create a chain that will be bigger and stronger than all of these if we want adoption of crypto? If we don't want to rely on these guys that they will actually do it, they haven't yet, and we know they made trade-offs which easily can be argued unnecessary in retrospect. How do we create something that will not only outperform but also excel, but most importantly reach results? Oh, and also, you don't have any funding for it. No VCs, no team founder allocation, and no ecosystem funding. Because that would mean relying on central authorities and pre-minting allocation. So we have thought about this a lot, and this is the interpretation we have of what we are doing and want to achieve with X1. So let's move on and talk about the objectives of X1. The X1 objectives. Our strategy with X1 will aim towards following the first principles of crypto: decentralization, transparency, peer-to-peer value exchange, counterparty risk resistance, and self-custody. We want to create an open source, trustless, decentralized, and censorship resistant chain. We want to create a chain fully owned by the community without central authorities, VC funding, team, or founder allocation. We want to create demand for Zen for many, many years to come. And we want to create strong momentum for X1 using Zen as currency. We want to connect all the 11 EVM chains and future ones as well. We want to create a bridge in between the EVM and Bitcoin that is trustless, allowing users with full self-custody to transfer value without relying on fiat-backed stablecoins or centralized exchanges. We want to create synergetic economic forces for value creation based on activity on-chain and activity using bridges. We want to interoperate with other crypto ecosystems with shared values and complementary technology. We want to contribute in the battle for alternative systems where individuals and communities all around the world can be safer, more free, and in more control over their self-sovereign lives. There are huge challenges to live up to these objectives, and it's gonna take a long time to get there, but we have to do it. And we think X1 will be highly competitive because instead of having a coin distribution looking like this, we can instead have a fully community-owned L1 that is this. And we think this will have a huge effect for the sustainability and growth of the ecosystem. It won't be us who have to convince everyone why we made the pie chart look like this. It's everyone else who will have to justify why they made those design choices, why they chose to alienate the community for owning part of the infrastructure, why you had to sack billions, and why you had to opt into a system without control. You don't have to be a genius to figure out that these models, based on their foundations, one way or another will create misalignment between the investors, the community, and the team. The biggest differentiator we have over any other chain is that we can align incentives at its core. That will also potentially last in perpetuity. It's very significant. The glue that aligns these incentives is actually ideology, which is true both for Zen and X1. The ideology is not something abstract or mesmerizing. It's principles. It's the realization that the common denominator that brings us all together in this very fragmented world is the need and necessity to remove trust from the system. By having systems completely transparent, aim for high levels of decentralization in everything we do, allow for self-custody in the peer-to-peer network, removing counterparty risk, and in turn make that censorship resistant so it can sustain and keep those values intact. It's a very interesting problem to solve because infrastructure that will last for a long time with aligned incentives in the whole ecosystem with strong individual economic forces where the forces become synergetic, first principles based, trustless, censorship resistant, peer-to-peer value exchange decentralized. But in all of this, how do we create something that will drive us towards adoption? So, question for you, is this something you want to be a part of or not? Zen and X1 at its core is not an investment strategy, it's ideology. For ideology to take shape, we need a value layer. And this brings financial incentives. And then it becomes investments for the individual. But it's secondary to the ideology that is at its core. And this is what sets Zen and X1 apart from any other system out there. So this is where we're coming from. And now let's dive into the specifics of the Litepaper version 1.2. How do we now convert all of this into infrastructure practically to get the desired results? And here's our strategy. So X1 is a first principles based layer 1 Ethereum virtual machine compatible solution with Bitcoin integration fully owned by the community. The current strategy is to fork the Polygon code, have it open source one way or another. The X1 DevNet, which is up and running, is running on Polygon Edge. The problem there is that they're no longer actively developing Polygon Edge. We have Polygon Supernets, which is very new and has certain restrictions. Seeky EVM is also new, but we are watching it very closely. Instead, we might want a complete fork of Polygon, but not need any of the commitments to Polygon, thus being able to do whatever we want. We haven't found anything better than Polygon in terms of performance as of now, and they have $1 billion for development, which we can leverage. As for performance, X1 DevNet and testnet has been thoroughly speed tested, resulting in the ability to system 1 second block time and 1400 transactions per second, roughly 100 times faster than the current version of the Ethereum blockchain. However, you do have to realize we are conducting ongoing research as to which platform can deliver the best open source tech in terms of performance and security. And it could be that we won't use Polygon at all, but something completely different if it would turn out to be better. So we are conducting extensive research across all these networks. We do have a lot of time to get to the roots of the best solution because X1 won't launch until 2024. And that gives us time to find a solution that fits our needs and objectives. And having stress tested all the Zen deployed chains, we have a pretty good insight as to what pros and cons the existing L1s have. And that's true for the EVM world, but we're also looking outside of the EVM world. So what makes X1 unique? And this is what we've written in the Litepaper version 1.2. The code base will remain open source. We are adopting a permissionless model where anyone can become a validator. What makes X1 unique is a strong presence on many various chains, not trying to convince users to go to X1, but users will always have an incentive to do so if they have participated on the other chains. We have experience from 12 chains where we have tested hard to the max, and that experience to the team and the whole ecosystem is a power feature that makes us very unique. Many users and high activity on all chains. It's not only about copying a chain and think that that will be the end of it without mentioning any names. We've seen that before, and we have to say it's not impressive in terms of innovation. We're not looking at being in a position where we have to spend marketing money convincing everyone else that our chain is faster, better than the others, and that's the reason why you as a user should come and interact with us. A big part of what makes X1 unique is being at the epicenter of the two biggest networks, Bitcoin and the EVM world. If we're serious about adoption, it would be wrong not to create that strong interoperability tied to the chain at its core. These are proportionally scaled in size based on market cap, and we're not satisfied with only being in the EVM world. The combined is a way more attractive market to pursue. In my last stream, I detailed more precisely for the difference between these two networks and the importance for us to be in between, and we already have solutions to make that happen in the works. I've yet to find any compelling argument as to why we shouldn't adopt this in our strategy. So the unique factors for X1 at its core is really that it creates a demand for further utility for Zen. It's based on first principles. It's aiming for a complete trustless system, which is 100% community owned, with an open source code base, with a permissionless model so anyone can become a validator, which is encouraging community participation and activity, with a possibility to opt in to chain ownership for a very long time, and bridging EVM and the Bitcoin ecosystems technically, financially, and culturally, with strong activity on all the EVM chains. Built-in incentives for X1 flow from EVM chains, and unique experience from the 11 EVM chains and Bitcoin, where we stress tested them to the max, has given us valuable insights to create something much stronger. One very interesting aspect is how we are seeing we can build X1 is we're building it in a way where we can create synergetic economic forces of activity. And I will talk about this later, but we have transactions on X1, which makes yield to stakers. We have transactions using X1 EVM and the Bitcoin bridge, which are making fees for LPs flowing into X1. And by tying them together with a ratio, you have a super feature built in. And I will in a bit explain to you in detail how all of this works. XN is the native coin on X1. The consensus algorithm closely follows the approach of Polygon, utilizing the delegated proof of stake, so-called DPoS mechanism. So regarding utility of the XN coin, XN holders can earn rewards by staking their coins or actively participating as validators and block producers. So the XN coin enables validation, delegation, and staking operations that contribute to the X1 chain's security and consensus. Regarding XN tokenomics, even though it's a coin, the initial supply is 1 billion, although it's not pre-mined, it's received through participation in the network, and that's an important distinction. Block producers receive XN as rewards for each successfully produced block, and this increases the supply over time. But users of X1 also burn XN by paying gas fees for each transaction. And this gas fee mechanism followed the guidelines of EIP 1559, also known as the London hard fork. And this process of burning XN through transactions contribute to reducing the overall supply over time. By implementing these mechanisms, we can utilize proven models for establishing continuous deflation throughout the lifespan of the X1 blockchain. And in other words, we can achieve gradual reduction in supply of XN coins, which will foster long-term value appreciation and sustainability within the ecosystem. So the supply of 1 billion is not exact. It's inflationary with validators validating blocks, and it becomes deflationary by burning XN with transaction fees. Now let's talk about the XN token distribution. So let's look at some pie chart, and let's look at how we derived to the proposed distribution. This is what we proposed to the community a few months back, where we had 50% to the community through various actions, 10 to 20% to VCs to get funding with accredited investors, 30 to 40% to a foundation for founder and team allocations and ecosystem incentives, etc. You just don't create a chain and hope for the best. There's a reason why VCs and allocation exist. It's energy and incentives that can be directed when it needs to. And this could be a solution where we have power over giving Zen utility, sure, but the incentives would always in one way or another mismatch between the team, community and the investors. But it would also expose us to a larger regulatory risk, and worst of all, censorship. If we have a central authority, it becomes a honeypot for the powers at be, who without a doubt want to shut us down at any given opportunity. But this is instead where we have ended up today, with 100% community allocation. And we're presenting you with a solution that can be fully community owned, with minimized central authority for governance, trustless tech released to self-sovereign people. A solution where everything goes to the community. No VCs, no team or founder allocations, ecosystem incentives built in, censorship resistant and less regulatory risky. This is actually what we originally thought we could do in our naivety. We thought Zen is the people's money and X1 could be the people's chain. But reality hit, and for us to propose something, we had to be realistic with expectations. You just don't magically come up with solutions day one. It's taken a lot of work to get to this point where we actually feel hopeful that it can be done, even though there are still many challenges with it. So how do you convert this into something that is truly unique and also powerful with fairness in mind? So in version 1.2 of the Litepaper, we presented how this can be achieved in a way that fulfills our objectives with why we are making the chain. Parts of this was very expected, and other parts, such as the bridge conversion, took some by surprise. And I will explain to you what it really means and sort out all the misconceptions around the bridge conversions. Now, some of you might have expected and will argue for something looking more like this, which would feel more right based on Zen participation or previous announcement. But what we propose now is something we believe will lift the whole ecosystem up. It's something that will amplify the ecosystem and make Zen and X1 stronger. We know that we can get Zen to burn for X1, but what's going to pull it? Whenever you convert economic energy from one form to another, that other needs to be powerful in itself. That other needs to have something, a value proposition that is so desirable you can't not participate. The utility should be so strong, it should be stronger than the laws of gravity. And I will now present something that is still an idea and still in the works. It's sort of in between version 1.2 and 1.3, but we are working towards figuring out if this is possible and if it does make sense. And again, don't focus too much on the allocation, just the ingredients in this new proposed mix. So here, based on community feedback and a whole lot of logic, we are actively thinking to include NFTs here as well. And everyone has them. There's over 2.5 million minted across all chains. There's a lot of game theory we created for them that would be great to utilize for maximum participation. So more on that in version 1.3, but I think we can do a lot of fun with this, and they will be highly beneficial for X1 participation that will benefit Zen a lot as well. There's huge amounts of incentive that needs to be aligned here. For instance, how do you calculate the accumulated value of Zen in the middle of claim and mint with only one gas cost paid? How do you counteract double counting and burns from the other buckets? How do you align all of the game theory and incentives with the NFTs, etc., etc.? What's very important to realize that this is outcome, this is not initial, and that's a very big difference, because this leads to a lot of misconceptions. For you to fully grasp the allocations, you have to put them in relation to time, activity, and the conditions, the difficulty to get the allocation. It's not only about size. So now we're gonna dissect the individual distribution methods. I'm not gonna cover the NFT conversion here because we're still working on it, but the other ones we're going to dive deep into. So let's first talk about the Zen burn records method of distribution. Every time a user burns Zen, a burn record is created. And it's a very simple process. Looks something like this. A user has Zen, he burns it, a burn record is created on chain. We can then create a burn registry to register all of these burn records, and XN can then be airdropped on X1 based on the distribution method that we decide to go with. The distribution of XN coins will be equally amongst all the participants since the inception until supply last, with monthly aggregation to counteract individual spikes of burn activities. So it would be some kind of inverse exponential curve, not exactly like this, but rewarding early participants and paying out for a long time. It could be 8, it could be 20 years with declining allocation through airdrops. So you burn Zen like coal and then you refine it to jet fuel, to XN, which in turn also burns when spent on transaction. Think like elements. You have the native gas token, ETH or BNB or whatever chain you're on. So you refine it into Zen when you mint it, which is better. And it's like coal to crude oil, which can burn easily. And finally, you have jet fuel with XN that can power your rocket. And this is a strong power feature that makes our token distribution very original. Number one, it's based on activity with proof of participation. Number two, it goes on for a very, very, very long time, giving opportunity for many users to onboard into the infrastructure system. It's like a carpet being rolled out for many, many years, giving opportunity for many, many users to come in and be part of the system. Number three, it's simplicity, because any user can burn for any project at any chain and get an allocation. And any project can promote that burning Zen for my project will get you XN. And here's the calculator to show you exactly how much with minor assumptions. It's also very fair because every project built on top of Zen would be treated equally. The tokens would be airdropped to the user on X1, and this pulls the users in from all the chains into X1. They will have an incentive built in to come to X1 for many, many years to come. It would be harder to get over time, so you have to burn more to get the same, but more competition and less to burn for. And we're playing with many different models here in time. If you look at yearly halving, for example, this is way too fast for as a distribution. We can do like 4 years like Bitcoin, and it's also perhaps too fast. In some models we have estimated 24 years or even paying out to eternity with the long tail. A factor we look at is how it relates to Zen itself, which have an 8-year amplifier. So it incentivizes users to continually burn Zen, and it creates huge utility for Zen. So all in all, this is something that will burn a very large amount of Zen continuously through time. Some of the challenges we are working with when it comes to this is how do you distribute between the chains? Is it based on market cap, users, cost, or is it a hybrid of them all, or is it other factors? And another challenge is how you involve new chains over time, since we are planning to expand the horizontal expansion for Zen ecosystem. Many more chains will be adopted, so how do we account for those? And then we have the Zen burn auctions, and the burn auctions is very similar to the Zen or what we propose with next, with some changes that are pretty profound. So the auction will be going on for 333 days, so it's 333 million in dedicated supply, so it's 1 million per day, and the auctions would be with 24-hour cycles. So Scenion 1 burns 1 billion, Scenion 2 burns 2 billion in a 24-hour cycle. That's a total of 3 billion, and then we take the percentages of that to divide the daily million. We are also thinking that this could have been deflationary release of the daily supply, but we don't really think it's needed since participation likely will increase by time anyway, so difficulty will naturally increase. And the reason for these Zen burn auctions is to build momentum. And we will actually model the EOS auction for this. The auction was incredibly successful. They raised $4 billion, which is the biggest ICO still up until this day. Now imagine, instead of us taking all that money, the Zen immediately gets burned, instead benefiting the whole ecosystem. Normally you can only burn for the current cycle. Here's an addition we borrow from the EOS auctions as well. You will be able to pledge Zen for a future date and time. So you can deposit Zen in the burn contract for a future date, which creates very exciting game theory and also creates a market of demand for X1. You can see that X amount of billions or trillions Zen is about to be burned. Pledging allows for a market to be created, and we can show on a dashboard that this is how much that will be burned in the next 300 days or whatever. We can show that that demand is there for the next 300 days. Also, the auctions will occur on Ethereum and the other chains, more on that later. And why is it so, and not have them on X1? Because we want to start the auctions earlier than the chain launches. So if the chain will launch in Q1, Q2 2024, then we can have it traded much earlier. So what you auction for is an ERC20 version of XN on Ethereum that then can be redeemable one-to-one to the 333 million equivalent on X1 using Polygon Plasma Bridge or something like that. There will be no staking incentives on Ethereum, only on X1, so just liquid supply there. And yes, the auction will most likely be on all chains, not only on Ethereum. And there's many reasons as to why we initially in version 1.2 only wrote Ethereum. And the most prevalent one was that it's one thing to have an auction and then distribute the token, but then the expectations is of course also to be able to bridge this token into X1, and we would have to provide that bridge infrastructure from all of the different chains, and we would also have to make sure that they were safe. But we did find a solution for it, which is quite elegant in that we can just create a contract on each chain which takes your XM, burns it, creates a burn record, and then use this burn record to mint your XN on X1. So it's a bridgeless transfer of economic energy. And this is awesome because then we think we can provide an elegant and simple and safe solution to include all of the chains with this method. I've seen some feedback from Xenians wanting to extend the time of the auction to 500 days or even longer. More days, more burn. And there's pros and cons with this. We have a lot of time to discuss it regarding the time duration, since the Zen burn auctions will have an estimated start in September of this year. But all in all, the Zen burn auctions will burn a lot of Zen, so all Xenians will be very, very happy. And then we have the bridge conversion that a lot of people has had the most difficulty to comprehend, but I will explain how it works in detail. So the first two methods of distributing XN burns and creates a lot of utility for Zen in the mid to long-term perspective. But again, you have to ask, what are you burning for? And part of it relates to the need to be a chain with strong mechanics for utility built within. We need to compensate for marketing liquidity and be innovative so we can get more users into the Zen ecosystem. And I will now go in depth on this topic because I want you to understand how it works. When Ordinals as a tech was released in February, we immediately began to investigate how we could connect the EVM and Bitcoin world. There's no way for Bitcoiners to earn yield on their Bitcoin, and we understood the importance of bridging the two worlds. We called it XSATs back then, if you remember, but the solutions we came up with then involved having a treasury, which is of course not ideal, and it was way more complex. But with BRC20, we now realized, hey, this could work much better. The role XSAT would have fits perfectly for VMPX with some serious improvements. So we now have a solution in the works for trustlessly transferring value in between the chains without using a fiat-backed stablecoin. So what is VMPX? VMPX serves as a bridge liquidity token connecting the Bitcoin and Ethereum X1 blockchains. It exists as a BRC20 token on the Bitcoin side and as an ERC20 token on the Ethereum side, both having a total supply of 108 million tokens each. So holders of VMPX tokens can earn yield by providing liquidity between the chains through staking into the bridge liquidity pool. Additionally, VMPX token holders have the flexibility to exchange either type of token for the other at a 1-to-1 ratio, BRC20 to ERC20 and vice versa. The ultimate objective of the VMPX token is to facilitate seamless swaps between BRC20 and ERC20 tokens across the Bitcoin Ethereum bridge. And furthermore, VMPX token holders can convert their tokens to XN native coins on the X1 blockchain at a 1-to-3 ratio using a smart contract. These XN coins can then be utilized to provide liquidity for the Bitcoin Ethereum X1 bridge. By enabling efficient cross-chain liquidity provision and token swaps, VMPX plays a crucial role in fostering interoperability and expanding the possibilities for users in the Bitcoin Ethereum X1 blockchain ecosystems. And the bridge would work something like this. So first you need an equal supply on both sides, Ethereum and Bitcoin, and we can call them eVMPX and bVMPX respectively. And the supply is distributed with a fair launch on both sides. What the holders can do is that they can stake their ERC and BRC20 tokens respectively into a liquidity pool, which we call the bridge LP. So-called single-sided staking. So they provide liquidity and in return they earn fees from the swaps that are happening on the bridge. So that's one thing they can do. What they also can do is they can swap these tokens interchangeably in between each other, because the eVMPX and bVMPX are pegged 1-to-1 to each other. So they can make a swap like this, like that. So senior number 1 is now the holder of the token on the Bitcoin side, and senior number 2 is the holder on the Ethereum side. How the conversion to XN would work is very simple. It's like this. The holder of eVMPX, and only the holder of eVMPX, can convert his token into XN on X1 with a 1-to-3 ratio. So 1 MPX can be converted into 3 XN. And when he does that, the holder gets the XN token. The eVMPX that was converted into XN is not burned because we want to keep the liquidity in the pool for the swaps. So the eVMPX instead goes into a contract controlled by the validators of X1 and gets redeposited into the bridge LP. Now the fees are instead earned by the validator controlled contract and then further distributed into the X1 ecosystem. And this can then be used for whatever we need. It could become staking rewards, it could go to validators, which improve security, or it can go to something else. So the one-way conversion would actually bring with it that fees would start funding the chain. And this is a very smart way in which we can create liquidity for the bridge with aligned incentives. As more and more eVMPX gets converted, more and more fees are being fueled into X1. So here's misconception number 1 that I've heard a few times, and it's the conversion conditions. It's that the conversion can be done at any time by anyone, however they want. And this is not the case. The conditions for the conversion is something we can adjust based on the desired outcome in this design. And it can be based on time, it can be limited for years, or even based on amount per time, etc. So even if the eVMPX holder would want to convert right away, he wouldn't be able to. We still have to work out exactly what those conditions would be, but there would be a difficulty involved. Now, the misconception number 2 is that the whole allocation will be converted right away, and it's also not the case, because even if the eVMPX holder had the choice to convert It's not necessarily that he immediately will. Based on incentives, he is earning fees on the LP provision. So we can iterate the incentive mechanism here and set it up for the desired outcome that we want, or at least the conditions for such. Misconception number 3 is that the VMPX holders get a 33% allocation of X1. Now, if you mint and hold eVMPX, you have to actually choose to swap into VMPX if you so choose. And the reason you'd want to do that is perhaps that you would be attracted to the yield on the Bitcoin LP side, what they would get. So there would be incentives, but it's up to the holder to decide, and the control is in the eVMPX custody. And let's also mention what this system can enable. If we can make this happen, we can also extend it with some more magic to also facilitate ETH and BTC swaps. So X1 would now make fees from the swap of any token that would want to use the bridge. If we can make all of this work, which we are confident we can, that would be amazing, because now you can have a trustless swap in between Ethereum and Bitcoin, merging the transaction rails in between chains, which no one has done. Using VMPX as the bridge token, which is capped in supply and fairly distributed. A lot of bridges force you to use stablecoins such as USDT, which are linked to fiat and inherently inflationary. And you don't have to go through a centralized exchange to go in between the chains. A lot of capital moves in between the chains. Every swap can generate yield to stakers. Since VMPX has a cap supply, the value will rise with user activity with the swaps. The function of VMPX is a bridge token for LP between the chains. It's not a stablecoin. It's not tied to the US dollar. If Fed prints 2 times the money supply again, VMPX will 2x in price in dollar terms. So it's an anarchy system not based on USD. So regarding the 33% VMPX conversion allocation, even though 1/3 technically could convert, many won't convert because of the bridge swap yield. 1/3 of the supply will never actually be fully unlocked, most likely. And we didn't say how quickly you can convert. We can have a protocol that takes 2 years. It can be a throttle, so people can't make it super quickly. And 1/3 of the XL allocation can therefore be locked for a very long time, which in turn is very bullish for the Zen 333 auctions and the XN. So now you're thinking, how can I get a hold of eVMPX? So let's talk about Zen Dependence Day. On the 4th of July 2023, on Zen Dependence Day, the mint rush will occur for eVMPX. An equal amount of tokens as the BRC20 will be distributed on the Ethereum blockchain. So what we did was that we modeled the BRC20 minting procedure and made a solidity contract with it. So the mint would be just like the mint for BVMPX on Bitcoins. So participants can choose the number of tokens to mint, ranging from 200 to 39,000 per transaction, covering the Ethereum gas cost. The distribution process based on Ethereum's block production time of 12 to 15 seconds will last between 8 and 12 hours. Each block with high participation should generate approximately 40,000 VMPX tokens. The trustless smart contract ensures a fair distribution without admin keys, only requiring gas for participation. Tokens are not pre-minted, and participants retain control over minting their own eVMPX tokens, similar to Zen. So test it out. If you go to our Telegram, you can now test mint the eVMPX on X1 DevNet. And the ambition is that we apply vampire technology over the whole Ethereum network during these hours to get the same effect that we got on Bitcoin, total takeover. So test it out on DevNet, and we will make more details on instructions on this mint in the coming days and weeks. But Zen Dependence Day will be awesome, and the rumor is that they will get us fireworks and everything, and as they say in America, it's going to be lit. Now, why not use Zen Burn for this mint? It's a highly important question that should be asked. We could do it, of course. There's nothing technically stopping us. It's game theory that we have created for everything else. And that's worked great for aligned incentives. And we're burning a lot with the other distribution methods. However, to burn just to burn is not always the most efficient way to get what you want for a particular tactic, aiming for a particular outcome. We went from a supply estimate of 550 trillion just a few months ago to 320 trillion in a few months. So we're not concerned with too much inflation. What we want with this distribution is to completely disrupt Ethereum, the same way we did with Bitcoin. It's a marketing push strategy. Zen and Zen Burn won't alone raise the gas price on Ethereum. Another reason is that many users don't have liquid Zen right now, so there's less point to have users compete for liquid Zen. If we link Zen valuation to anything, it won't give Zen higher valuation. But if we link the Ethereum burn to VMPX and XZen, and thereafter the XN value, we are bringing more value in. We want the future value to come, and controversial events generate huge value impact. Also, Zen burn records and Zen auctions will burn huge amount of Zen as well, so users can save powder for these events. A big reason is that we want to mimic the mint event on the Bitcoin side. So we made the Solidity smart contract to mimic the mint process on Bitcoin, as I said, and if we include the Zen burn here, it won't make the mints equal as they should be on both sides. The BRC20 mint set a floor on Bitcoin. As I explained in previous streams, we changed the course forever for Bitcoin. We said Zen is coming to Bitcoin and we blew up Bitcoin. So we can expect it to happen on Ethereum, that people won't be able to do swaps during the mint, or they will have to pay like $200 per swap or some insane thing like that. This will get a lot of attention. They will ask who we are and why did we do it. So the floor price of all of our projects can now natively be linked to Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are the two biggest networks, and nobody has done it like this before. So I'm going to talk more about that very soon. So a common question is, why don't we just use Zen for the bridge? And the reason is Zen is inflationary. It cannot be used as a bridge token. It needs to be the same supply on both sides, and you need a one-to-one peg. There can be no inflation of any kind. It could be burned, but it will never inflate. So we need another token as a bridge token. As described with VMPX, it fits perfect for that task. But then how does VMPX relate to first principles? So let's go over the list. And this goes for both VMPX and eVMPX. So first is self-custody. And of course, in everything we do, have self-custody with no counterparties. Immutable code. On Bitcoin, everything is immutable by default, which is why it's so cool. For BRC20, this is standard, which is a big reason why it's so very interesting. With Ethereum, the code we have is deployed as 100% immutable as well, with no admin keys. Permissionless participation. You just need a wallet and some Bitcoin to participate, and that's it. And the same goes for Ethereum. You just need a wallet and some ETH. Decentralized, we wanted to make a big impact on the BRC20 space. Fungible tokens on Bitcoin. And as I explained also in my stream that I called Bitcoin Zen BRC20 Adoption and Wayne Gretzky, don't go where the puck is, go where the puck is going. The mission here was to create the most decentralized BRC20 in existence, which we also succeeded in. We saw that many BRC20s was not really fairly distributed and had too few holders and big founder allocations. So we wanted to make an impact in the space and show everyone that high levels of decentralization is key and push this industry in the right direction. Transparent, everything is fully on chain with all transactions, of course. It's trustless, no intermediaries or treasuries of any kind, immutable code, instant finality, sort of it's Bitcoin with 10-minute blocks, but on Unisat it's instant settlement in the UI, at least since they read from the mempool. Peer-to-peer, 100% censorship resistant, default on Bitcoin, same with Ethereum, unless Vitalik will censor our contract for the mint. When it comes to inflation, the BRC20, the standard is cap supply with no inflation.
It will be capped for the VMPX as well with the same supply. Fair launched, announced ahead of time. The tricky thing is announcing too far in advance with the BRC20 because people will actively scan for tickers to pre-mine, but there was no pre-allocation of any kind. VMPX is 100% fair launch as well. Simple, you just need a wallet and some Bitcoin and click mint. And as we showcased before how it all works with Zuni and Pussy, and it will be very, very simple as you can try on DevNet to mint VMPX as well. And regarding giving BVMPX utility related to X1, only eVMPX will be able to convert, but BVMPX will have the utility for fee generation on the Bitcoin side by providing liquidity. We did announce multiple times that we would give BVMPX utility over and over. And then some say, oh, but I didn't think it was going to be that good or that big of a utility. When we say we will give utility for a token without disclaimers, we do it. It's an interesting question when it comes to proof of participation, I think, because this is not HODL America, where participating in the ecosystem by just hodling will set you by the best outcomes for every thinkable scenario while we innovate and have a constant edge over those who are actively participating in the ecosystem. We are innovating as a form of curiosity and necessity to find the cutting edge solutions that will lift the whole ecosystem up. There can be balance there too. It's totally fine that there is some balance, because if you've been an active participant in everything Bitcoin we have explored, thought, innovated in the past months, you would have minted and participated in BRC20s, very most likely. Some of you said this is just shit tokens, they have nothing to do with Zen, it's just meme tokens, I don't want to touch it. Everything is economic energy that we can use for innovations if we find a strong use case for it. Others said, wow, this is cool, I want to play, I want to learn, I want to make Bitcoin games on chain, I want to inscribe in ordinals, I want to participate in mints in revolutionary ways never before possible. It's not for everyone, and I will talk about that soon when it comes to speculation. Those who participated actively in DXN early were greatly rewarded. Participate early is risk, but you can also be highly rewarded. Another point is the marketing collateral we have with the story of VMPX. If you look at this, we made history on Bitcoin. It was the first time miners ever got more paid from transaction fees than block rewards for transactions on chain. We did that, and you just don't do it like that. And that's why the creation story of BVMPX and also eVMPX is freaking awesome to bring into X1. Being able to serve as the value driver and also generate fees. Bitcoin hasn't had DeFi. You couldn't do anything with your Bitcoin until now. And there's 550 billion of that. There is capital very eager to be in the use for something. So this allowed for BRC20 to go from 0 to $1 billion as a market in 2 months. We are in the epicenter of that. We have the second highest market cap, and we have all eyes on us now for what we will do next with VMPX. If we don't use that, then what are your thoughts there? That yes, we can figure out some other ways how to make the L1 competitive with zero marketing budget. Innovation and agility is our super features as a team and community. Those need to be amplified. Nobody is going to give us adoption. We have to create it. So yes, I think that VMPX is fully first principles. And someone said this is not fair, just redeploy the BRC20 and start over. But then you have to ask yourself, is it fair to those who were promised utility without a disclaimer that they would get utility for BVMPX? Is it fair to those who spent $7 million on the mint of BVMPX in the fair launch on Bitcoin? Is it fair to those who participated in and followed our path for the last 4 months with Bitcoin, ordinals, inscription, BRC20 not to be included in X1? I think the incentives align very, very well here. BVMPX earns fees from the bridge on the Bitcoin side. eVMPX, which anyone can mint in the upcoming Independence Day, can earn fees. It will cost to mint, But they have a conditioned allocation to XN where fees go to X1 stakers or validators if they do. Xenians get a BTC ETH trustless bridge built into the core of the chain, which enables liquidity, new users, new capital to enter our ecosystem, to flow into our ecosystem protocols, which they need to get somehow, right? Users can use a bridge not dependent on a centralized exchange or fiat-backed stablecoin. So, does your entitlement to something we create triumph innovation, an integrated, powerful fee generation engine part benefiting the whole ecosystem? Is it fair that a feudal society emerges up and whales manipulate markets? Or is it fair that new people come in with activity and participation and also can be early for once? Zen OGs still reap plentiful rewards from the degeneracy that goes on top. Active participants and early contributors all in alignment. I think it's beautiful. The XN allocation remains 100% fairly distributed. We will talk more about this in the next chapter about economic forces in Synergy, but first let's go to a summary of the XN distribution.
So we explained in more detail what the distribution channels were and what the purpose of them was. So we have the Zen burn records, which gives incentives for users to onboard on all chains for a very, very long time. And the purpose is to onboard through activity. Then we have the Zen burn auctions, which creates a strong momentum and creates a market of demand for X1. Both of these events will burn a shitload of Zen. And then we have the bridge conversion, the catalyst event for the chain that merges the EVM and the Bitcoin world, that generates fees for the chains, that provides trustless bridge not dependent on a centralized exchange or fiat-backed stablecoins, and enables attraction of users, liquidity, and capital. And then we are actively thinking to include these NFTs because they have incredible game theory. It will yield high participation. It still needs to be worked out how to integrate it exactly, but we're hoping to give an update on this in version 1.3. This distribution ensures longevity. It links the whole Zen ecosystem together, and it creates a machine for adoption. So let's talk about the synergetic economic forces of X1. We can't say anything about value, it's up to the market to decide, but what we can talk about is the interconnectedness between economic energies, how they are connected and how they could be value drivers. There's a few models to describe this, and I'm going to try a few of them to see what sticks. There's 2 points to make regarding economic forces in Synergy. The first point is that there are 2 synergetic forces for economic growth. XN reduction through burn with transactions on X1 and transactions with the cross-chain bridge. The more activity X1 has, the more XN will be burned with transaction, and that increases the value of X1. The more activity the bridge has, the more fees are generated to the chain. Zen being burned to fuel X1 through auction burns and chain activity on all the chains is a value driver for X1 and in turn Zen itself. So you have a force of activity through ecosystem participation. Zen burn drives Zen value. XN burn with transaction activity drives XN value. XN fixed ratio with VMPX and VMPX cross-chain bridge activity drives the VMPX value. The second point is how they are all related to each other. Ethereum, Bitcoin, XN, Zen, and VMPX. So VMPX will get value from the floor price on Bitcoin and Ethereum. VMPX is the bridge, so the more traffic, the more value it will get. VMPX can be converted to XN, which means that it has a floor price also in XN. On the other side, XN is pulled up by the price of VMPX and is held up by the floor price of Zen. Here's how they relate. VMPX has a relation to Bitcoin. The Bitcoin mint price set the floor. The value of VMPX is linked to the bridge traffic. XN floor is set by the eVMPX conversion. XN is held up by the Zen burn, and eVMPX strengthens the VMPX floor by the ETH mint price. So it's incredible the relationship we can create in between them. And when it comes to yield, VMPX you can also earn yield by staking, and XN you can earn yield as a delegated proof of stake staker. So the value is linked, but the utility is different. We have another way to describe the relationship between the economic forces, which is done by zencrypto.io, and here you can check the link to read the article, which was very well written. I think it was very well described. So it's another way to describe this relationship. And if we begin, it looks like this, but if we begin down here with Zen, XN comes into existence primarily by burning Zen. So Zen is the core component of X1, and we've seen that the price of gas, especially on Ethereum, is the main factor in establishing Zen's price. So Ethereum gas sets the floor price for Zen, which means that it's difficult for it to fall below the minimum gas cost of the mint. So Ethereum gas sort of sets a floor for the Zen price. The price of XN will depend on the price of burn Zen. The higher the cost of burning Zen, the higher the price of XN. So burn sets the value for XN. If we move over to the other side and look at VMPX and its relation to the floor on Bitcoin. So the price of VMPX on the other side of the bridge is based on the price of mint, with Bitcoin's price and the cost of a single Satoshi serving as the floor. It is predicted, and this is just speculation by the way, but it is predicted by many that this year we'll see the BRC20 summer, where the tokens will enjoy huge interest, and as more people use them, the cost to mint rises, making the block space always more scarce and expensive. And then we have eVMPX on the Ethereum mint. So the mint rush on Ethereum on Zen Independence Day and the gas expended on it will be the main factors in establishing the initial price of the ERC20 VMPX token. After the bridge is open, it will balance out with the price of BRC20. And of course, both these have a relation to the bridge activity. So on the level of the bridge, VMPX is the key point where liquidity and traffic from two giants converge. The fees generated will drive the value of VMPX up, of course, because it's a utility token for bridge liquidity. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, by having this conversion between VMPX and XN 1 to 3, it's very interesting in terms of how they relate to value, because the possibility to exchange ERC20 VMPX 1 to 3 to XN means that one influences the price of another. VMPX they will have, which I think is maybe better to say could have, a higher price than XN, which means that the VMPX has a floor price not only Bitcoin but also in XN. It's also pulling the price of XN up thanks to the value of Bitcoin and the traffic generated on the bridge. So very interesting, because the floor price of all our projects is natively linked to Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are the two biggest networks, and nobody has done it like this before, so it's insanely interesting. VMPX has utility by being a functional bridge enabler, and value goes up with real traffic. Yes, they also write like this. This is an intricate web of synergetic interactions between tokens and networks. They all create a complex ecosystem where the Zen community is at the heart and a generative force behind the economic power of all of them. The main objective of Zen has always the strict attainment of the first principles of crypto and global adoption. Zen's presence on 11 networks and the X1 chain with 1 second block time and 1400 transactions per second are the first step in attaining this objective. The bridge with Bitcoin and access to the biggest community and liquidity is another. Creating connections among blockchains and letting capital flow freely is likely to raise the tide and let all boats float. When the tokens are in synergy with regards to their functionality, the price of one will affect the others. Nothing happens in a vacuum, and codependency is everywhere. More efficient markets create rich soil for capital and adoption, which benefits Zen. So big shout out to Medo Starveras and Zen Crypto for describing this beautiful relationship. And also to the Zen Turbo guys, which is just constantly providing value since the beginning. They created on zenturbo.io VMPX data, which you can follow as well. Big shout out. So yes, we also have to discuss an important topic which is related to everything we do and not specifically X1. Builders build and speculators speculate. So where can these two coexist in alignment with less confusion? It's not our goal to make sure everyone is happy, to please everyone. Our goal is to create systems that are trustless, so you don't have to trust because you can verify. Our goal is to make systems that will solve adoption. The road to get there is very chaotic, it's messy. But everything we do is fully focused on getting steps closer to actually solve adoption. So let me describe for you how we see the process of innovation working and needs to work in order to reach big results, and why, so you better understand why we do the things we do. And let's do it with the perspective of time. So we make a timeline. It all starts with an idea that's related to a problem that needs to be solved. In our case, we want to leapfrog solutions for adoption. Adoption of what, you ask? Adoption of getting a majority of the world's population interacting with a value layer that's based on first principles because it's needed. TradFi and crypto systems have failed, so we must continue to innovate until we reach that goal because the alternative is tyranny. So now we have our vision, and let's summarize it as adoption over here. We also know that this vision is most likely to become a reality if the systems we build are trustless and open source, with immutable code that cannot be changed. So at some point we need to take our innovations and deploy it to immutable code. That's the only way we can build trustless systems. So we make another dent on the timeline, which we can call the line of immutability. The other dent on the timeline is where an idea is born. Usually a new one every day for Jack, or you sharing your ideas with the community. So we have an idea attached to a goal in relation to a point in time where we need to set things in stone at the line of immutability. With Zen, we have done every effort we can to involve the community as early as possible in the creation process of building these future trustless systems to utilize the hive mind. So as soon as we have an idea that makes somewhat sense, we communicate it to the community. We are involving you in the laboratory where full degeneracy experimentation needs and does go on. Here, things break, things blow up, and some ideas prove to be highly effective. The higher and deeper the intensity of these iterations are, the faster we can reach solutions that are the best for the outcome we want to achieve. The alternative is that we create stuff behind closed doors here, and here we say, go, interact. Everything is clear, it's immutable, no questions unanswered, go ahead. But we don't want that. We want to involve you here, and so do most of you. Some love the ideas, some hate it, some will promote it and add to the ideas with hyperstructural improvements. Some will FUD it hard because they see threats of not achieving the desired goal in question for the community or for themselves. Whatever the feedback is, it's valuable. High intensity feedback is good and it improves the idea. Now turning into more and more of a strategy that can be converted into tactic and eventually come to deployment at the line of immutability. After that line has been crossed, there are no more uncertainties. You're now interacting with trustless code. Everything is transparent on chain, and you have as much information as we do and are able to take any highly educated decision about your investment. During this process, however, a lot of you like to speculate of the outcome of these ideas and try to figure out what the immutable code will be and what the results of that code with interactions and activity will be. Many of you even invest huge amount of your total capital into the speculation of these ideas very early on, which I strongly recommend against, since there's an abundance of variations and outcomes to consider. Some of you even get very upset when something that has been commuted here then changes here, and in turn your whole financial situation changes drastically as an outcome. Dev do something, price is falling. Some go on the offense, name-calling Jack to be a flip-flopper. Jack said this and now you do that. What's important for you to understand is that this is an open source network where anyone can build on and with. We have built this ecosystem by continuously removing as much power and central authority to ourselves as possible. And we have proved this with the tokenomics of Zen, and we are now proving it yet again with the tokenomics of X1. We base our decision based on what we think is best in order to achieve the long-term goal of achieving adoption. For that, we need the best solutions. We need our creation process to be as impactful as possible before we reach the line where we cannot change things anymore. It's very important that the ideas are battle-tested and the very best they can be. 1 degree off and we have a much weaker system longer down the line. And these graphs illustrate how much 1 degree of change have a huge outcome in the future. If you extrapolate the degree with time, the net effect is much bigger. So what we care about is that the effect here is huge. Whatever happens to the speculators who want short-time assurances and price action here, I hate to break it to you, but it's always going to be secondary. We want the max effect here, and ultimately that will bring value to everyone who participates here over time. Here you are in the laboratory with us. It's all experiments until it gets immutable. Things blow up. This approach we have taken from the very beginning. Imagine if we had been influenced by the thousands and thousands of people screaming at the top of their lungs daily with FUD, Dev do something, price is falling, Zen fails. Imagine if we for 1 second had spent our time trying to satisfy the short-term speculators wanting to get exit liquidity on a free plus gas plus time token. We would never be anywhere near where we are today. Instead, we have proved together that the model works. Zen works. Minters are in multiple plus under mints. Bam, let's continue. If we succeed, which we never give any assurances that we will, and why is it so? Because it depends on if we can make systems that millions of users will interact with or not. That outcome is out of our assurances, but if we succeed, then the value of Zen will be huge and the whole ecosystem as well for the projects that prove to the community that their code is working, their activity is high, and they continuously nurture their sub-community. We try to do our best to encourage and give projects what they need and want in order to grow. It's not our job, however, to delve into every project and fix their utility for them and spice up the price chart in the short term. That's not going to scale. If you want to make a project, here's users on all 10 chains waiting to give your protocol their money by burning the sweet, precious Zen for it. If the idea and code is good, they will. If you manage to create value for the community you create with time, which is the hardest part, they will stay. It's as simple as that. But if you as a speculator think that Jack needs to tweet about that project constantly to maintain a price level, something is wrong. We cannot possibly compete with the other L1s. You don't see Vitalik tweeting about every project. So in conclusion, this is how innovation works. Determining value of these things have never been more open when it comes to data available to analyze, but it's still high speculation. If you put your money into this, it's completely your decision. You have to be aware that everything can change until it's deployed. Then you know for sure what you're interacting with. But also, even at that point, these systems are highly speculative by nature. Dependencies stretch far outside the Zen ecosystem. The rest of crypto, competition with other systems, synergies with our projects and other systems, the macro environments, regulation, and speculation. So before you attack Jack for being a flip-flopper, just loop at least 4 times what we are trying to achieve and how. And if you don't like it or don't have the nerves for it, then don't participate in this process. Don't take that risk. Don't risk the money you will need in 6 months for something that is highly speculative. Be very careful with your investments, guys. We talked about it here as well. If the degeneracy is too much for you, just mint Zen. It's simple, it's low barrier, it's predictable. Just know everything we do is for the value creation of Zen and be free. Enter this area, you're now in risky territory. If you put more than 5% of your capital here, then you have to realize the risk you are taking. We are continuously trying to do our part and our best when it comes to communication, being clear, not over-promising. It is very difficult, so there's no doubt about it. Here, in this area, it's big boy pants, 100%. Here, you can be a little bit more nude. You can show some skin if you want. You can let little Johnny see the sunlight. We throw out ideas to the community. Some will be realized, some won't. Some will be picked up by the community builders, some won't. That's it, and that's all. Zen is immutable and it's done. It just needs adoption, but you have all of the data and the mechanics of exactly how it works. It's a much safer investment from that perspective than investing in X1, which is filled with hopium and no guarantees that it will ever be delivered, with no guarantees that it will have any value at all. Trust the code, the infrastructure of trust will be replaced by the infrastructure of truth. Alright, so today we talked about the ideology behind X1, why it's needed, and the objectives with the chain, what we are working towards and want to achieve. We talked what X1 is per definition, and we made the comments in terms of performance and the work we are doing to make the best chain ever possible. There's many things that separates X1 from other L1s. So we also discussed what we think makes X1 very unique. And we also talked about the XN coin, the native gas coin and its base utility, the supply of the XN tokenomics and the base parameters influencing both inflation and deflation. And then we went into the XN token distribution, what the core components for the machine that will get us to adoption. And then we further dissected the various distribution methods and how they will be done in relation to difficulty and time. We talked about the burn records, the Zen burn auction, and also the VMPX bridge conversion. And I hope there's more clarity in this, how it would work by now. And we also talked about how all of this fits together with the synergetic economic forces, how we can create a very powerful synergy and fee generation built into the core of the machine. And we also talked about the speculation that we have to have a relation to while we innovate. I hope you watched the whole video, and now we look very much forward to hearing your thoughts on this as well. And we intend to conduct a series of Twitter spaces to hear your thoughts. Hasta la vista, baby. Over and out. 10-2. This is Zen Zoo.